Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today is the day for the second part of the painting series of Karak the board game, the miniature set. And today we're going to take a look at the following figures that I've primed already. For those who want to take a look at how they look unprimed, please take a look at my unboxing of Karak the board game miniature expansion set. First, we've got actually the Warlock. I primed this one in black, and then I've highlighted up the areas that I want in facial details and skin color with white, as well as the skulls in the front. It looks like this, quite nice. Then I've got the Thief over here, a very beautiful figure, very detailed. And then finally, I've got the Oracle, also primed in white. And what we're going to do first is that we're going to take a look at the Warlock. I'm going to adjust the camera slightly over here, and I have chosen to apply a mixture of his clothing with a combination of Naggaroth Knight, most of it, as well as German dark grey from Vallejo, which unfortunately I don't have in here right now, but a German dark grey Vallejo, as well as Naggaroth Knight from Citadel. I've chosen to take 1 part German dark grey, as well as 4 parts Naggaroth Knight, because German dark grey is very dominant, but I still want it darkened, and I've diluted it with water as well. I'm going to be painting the figure's lower part here, the kind of the body armor is I'm going to be painting the top part of his cloak with this one, and then I'm going to do pure Naggaroth knife with a slight hint of black inside for the lower body part armor. So with that said, let's get going. Let's see if I can actually show it to you up here. Taking great care not to touch the white areas. I'm using a size 2 Winsor & Newton cotton brush here for this one. Make sure that the reason why I dilute the paint is that I don't want it to clog all of the miniature, and also that the miniature will, the paint will not, the paint will not obscure all these beautiful folds and part of the figure that I want to be seen. And on the back as well. For the lower part, which includes the entire armor and chest pieces, as well as the back, but not the pouches, and try not to get the belt, I've chosen to use the original mix of Naggaroth Knight, German dark grey, and a small hint of the Citadel's The Fang, which is an interesting blue color, and that is to lighten it a little bit, give it a slightly lighter look. As you can see here, I want it to be contrasting well off from the original paint. I'm trying not to touch the skulls here that I painted before. They're pre-painted. But if I do touch the belt or the straps over here inside, it's not a problem. We can fix it later. And getting inside of here, some of the details here can be a bit fiddly, but you'll get the hang of it quite easily. You can also paint the upper parts of the boots here, as well as the inside of this figure. You can also leave it black if you don't want to. That's why I primed this figure in black, so it won't be a problem really if you miss something. And that's what it looks like, what it should look like when it's fairly done. For the belt, mace handle, that's a mace, as well as the arm straps over here, I've chosen to use a color from Citadel called Rhinox hide. I'm applying it undiluted, and I'm also going to use this one for the boots, because this one will give it a fairly dark and not too much of a highlighting color. So applying it neat. As well as the straps over here. Angling the miniature can be a great help. You can't reach. You can also put it on some kind of sprue. I usually prefer not to do that because I like to handle the miniature by myself in my own hands, but other painters use this to great effect. So do what is most convenient for you. And don't forget the belt over here. You can also paint the pouches with this color, and we're going to highlight them up with a lighter color in a couple of stages. And don't forget the kind of strap on his wrist on the other side here, as well as the back of the wrist. The back of the boots can be easily missed. That's what it looks like. Quite okay. Let's see if I can show it to you more in detail. It's quite hard to see because all of them are fairly dark, but I think you could see most of it. Before we go into the mace and the metal parts, I'm going to do a brief repair action on the whiter parts so we can highlight them up later on. And for that, I'm going to use pure white. You can also use white grey. I'm showing you both here. For to touch up these areas, because once you're going to put on these lighter colors, it's really good, especially if you can use contrast colors. You need something white to show. And as you can see here, some areas here that we missed. Some on the skull. As well as the beard. And a little bit up here as well. And over here. Because it's a lot easier to repair this now before the highlight, because that means the white will have time to dry. Okay, now we can actually go on to painting the metal parts, which is the ball from the chain from the mace here, as well as all the metal straps on the back, and the front here, the clasps, and so on as well, before we're going to the contrast colors. And cleaning the brush between everything is really important. And now I'm going to use something called Natural Steel from Vallejo model color. It's kind of oily color. It's called natural steel. There's also oily steel, which you can also use. And an alternative for this one from Citadel will be lead belcher. Painting the metal first on this one. From all angles. You can go on to paint the steel here. The belt buckle. Oh, there you go, sorry. These ones, yeah. If you don't reach around all the way around, it's not a problem. If you prime it in black, then it's not going to show much anyways. In the back, you don't really have anything. Now it's time for the contrast colors, which is the face, hands, and forearms. And for that, I'm using Armor Painter's Crusader skin, which I think is a good color. There's a ball inside of it, like a ball bearing thing. Give it a good shake and apply it neat. Make sure your brush is really clean and dry when you apply this one, as contrast colors tend to be very fluid. And you can see here now that the white really shines through to give it a nice contrast. No pun intended. And you can let it pool in the recesses just like you would do with a wash. And as you've seen from my other videos using contrast colors, you can easily repair contrast color by dry brushing other parts, this part with a regular skin color paint such as Flat Flash from Vallejo. And time for the face. And a little bit more on the forearms that I missed here. Turn it around, so make sure you don't miss any angles. And there you have it. Now we'll leave this one to dry. And now we'll apply the final stage before we move on to the next figure, which is the facial hair, which is going to be painted pure black. I'm going to use black from Vallejo. We're not using glossy black in this case because we want it to be fairly matte. If we want to add a glossy black later, we can do that in highlight. Make sure that your brush is clean and dry. Don't load too much paint on it, so you can be fairly accurate with the details. Getting the moustache and the beard here, as well as the forehead and the inner sides of the cloak. Can be painted another colour as well if you want to. I prefer the black part simply because it will give the beard kind of like it fills up the cloak. Something like this. Looks like a pure bandit. We're going to leave this one aside to completely dry, and we're going to turn our attention to one of the other figures. In this case, we're going to take a look at the thief. Thief is a whole different project, and we're going to start by using contrast colors straight away. And let's close our paint brushes. Not brushes, our paint jars. And then we're going to paint this one. Is fairly green character. You can see from the character art here that she has long green robes, but also some chainmail, as well as some leather armor, as well as a nice sword here, and red, flaming red hair. So we're going to try to capture that in the card art. Here it's quite hard to see what it's been painted as, the Warlock, but you can see it has beautiful detailed patterns here on the robe as well as the forearms. We're going to try to capture that later on. But for now, let's turn our attention to the thief. And for the thief's green part, I am shaking a bottle of paint here, if you know what I'm doing. And I'm going to use a color called Citadel Contrast Dark Angels Green. So you can color I've never used before, and we'll see how that one pans out. It's a fairly dark green color. It's better to start with something really dark, and then we can highlight it up at a couple of stages afterwards. And if you feel unsure, just take a look at the card art of the board game and see if there's anything you might be missing. Something like this. Trying to get the brush underneath these folds and daggers can be a bit challenging sometimes, but with a little bit of practice, it can be really good. And that's why these models are really good to practice on if you're starting out as a miniature painter. And I couldn't recommend these contrast colors enough, because they really make the job a lot easier when you're painting. It pretty much skips both the stage of the base color and the wash and place them into one. I can angle this one up a little bit here so you can see what I'm doing. And see if you can also get the inner side here of this one. Can be a bit tricky, and you can leave it out if you don't want to. But getting the lower folds can be nice. Now also needs to be colored in green is these part of the leg. As well as the torso are close here. I'm going to try to get it in between the straps if possible. Try not to cover the chainmail if you can. And then as well for the back, try to paint between the straps. As well as the arms here are actually in the card art also painted green, so we're going to cover them here as well. Maybe it's some kind of green cloth that she's wearing. You can wear them, paint them in a kind of skin color if you want to, but I'm going to keep to the card art as much as I possibly can. And you can actually leave a lot of the brush color off in this case to make sure that it gets a lighter color according to the card art. This one done, we're going to go on to the next. Oh yeah, sorry, we almost forgot the bandana around her face. Give her up like this. You can have a look like this. Now, going to turn our attention to the leather parts. See if I can focus it. Something like this. For all the leather parts, I'm using contrast Snakebite leather from Citadel model color. So sorry about the pronunciation there. I got a bit tongue-tied. And for that, I'm using it on the upper part of the armor here. It's called almost as like a sepia shade here, this one. And I'm going to use it also on the leather armor up here, the shoulder pads. Very similar to what I did with the swordsman, Victorious the Swordsman, from the same game, in another video. Fairly light color, so if you feel it pools too much, just take a deep damp brush and move the colors along. You can also use it to paint the straps here. As well as the scabbard of the sword. Don't worry if it's some of the scabbard was painted over with some green, because we're going to fix it later with a small highlight. As well as the front straps. Something like this. Also forgot the gloves. Can also be painted this, as well as the boots. Not the armor on the boots later on, the lowest edges, or up above the shoes. They're going to be painted in metal. She's armored there apparently, according to the card art. But, oh, that was my watch. But these leather vambraces as well as the inner vambraces as well as on the other side. For the hair, I'm using a color called Jacarera Orange. I'm going to put it into light just in a second. Citadel's Jacarera Orange. Closing the lid so it won't spill anywhere. It's a fairly light, it's a fairly dark orange. And I don't use too much color on the brush. You can dilute it as well if you want to, but I've chosen not to in this case. I'm going to put it down. She has a fairly dark orange, not like really bright, like flaming. So that's what I'm trying to capture with this Jacarera orange. Like this. And that's what it looks like when you're more or less finished. Now I'm going to paint all the metal parts, which is the sword, chainmail, both front and back, as well as the belt buckle, chainmail skirt, and leather, these metal parts here on the shins, I think you call them in English. And for that I'm using, again, natural steel from Vallejo, which I think is a great colour. Using it neat. But you can also add a drop of water if you want to. You think it's too much. And let's start with the sword. Sword pommel. Now for the chainmail. And I think it really comes to life when you put this one on. Since I primed this one in white, the chainmail is really going to shine. As well as the dagger pommel, chainmail skirt, and the little wolf's head, I think it is. As well as the leather vambraces. No, not vambraces. I need to look at this one. What do you call them? If someone knows what these ones are called, the armor details, please put them in the comments so I learn. Because I keep missing them in several videos and it's getting a little bit frustrating. And especially since I'm a history geek myself, I should know. I really should. It's getting a bit embarrassing. And the back you can also put if you want to. Don't have to. Okay, this one almost done here. The only thing we've got left to paint in terms of base colors or contrast colors, call them whatever you want, is actually the face. And for that, there's no surprise here either. We're going to use Armor Painter's Crusader skin that I've used before. Let's just put it up here for you to see it. Armor Painter's Crusader skin. Got nothing really to do with Crusaders, but that's how they chose to name it. And you can let it really pull into the recesses of the eyes, because they are kept fairly dark in the card art. It looks quite terrible right now, but we're going to fix it in a few stages. Okay, this one is going to now leave to dry. And we're going to turn our attention to the final figure, which is the Oracle. Most of the Oracle has kind of like yellow, brown, light brownish color, so I'm going to try a contrast color Yanden yellow for this one, for all the yellow parts, which means the leather armor, the shirt up here, and of course the shirt back as well. As with all contrast colors, you apply the contrast colors neat. Really nice. I really like this color. Might be a new favorite of mine. Very vibrant, easy to paint, especially if you painted some white underneath. It's almost like gold. Try not to touch the straps up here. But you can paint all the other details around it. I'm going to put some more paint on my brush. Make sure that I cover these areas in the back, because as it acts kind of like a wash, you want it to pool in the recesses. Something like this. Something I forgot to show you was also the shoulder pads here, and on the back should also be in this color. Now, next I'm going to go for Crusader skin from Armor Painter for all the skin parts, which in this case is quite a bit. You can start with the knees here, back of the legs. Of course, her face, and of course the arms. Trying not to touch this crystal orb here. But getting on the fingers. Of course, the other arm and hand here. It's a fairly easy figure to paint. The other arm here that I missed. Very easy to miss things. That's why you angle the miniature. And as well as a little bit here on the skin here on the front that it shows in the card art. That's why I left this one out. If you feel that it's pooling too much, take a brush and fix it, damp brush, and just move it around. Something like this will do her justice. It's going to be quite tricky to paint the sandals with the skin in between, so I'm actually going to make it easy and paint snakebite leather on these sandals because it's fairly light color, as well as on all the belts and the strap here on the back. So we'll go on doing that. Cleaning the brush, closing the lid on all jars, and snakebite leather for leather parts, just like we've done in previous parts of this painting series. Moving on with the sandals, as well as the straps of the, can tend to be blending in fairly well with the others. We're going to highlight it up with some basic colors just when I get it on the miniature. She has a dagger here of some sort. So we're going to paint the dagger sheath scabbard with this color too, and the handle of the dagger. Moving around, stickling motion of the sandals, and the other side of the boots. For the handle of the bardish or large axe, I'm going to use contrast Sigor Brown. But any other dark kind of contrast color for wood would also be acceptable. Trying to take care not to touch the other parts we've already painted. Really beautiful miniatures here. Cannot recommend them highly enough. For Karak the board game, where you play as a dungeon delver for families. Some people have even ranked it higher than Gloomhaven for families. For this reason, it's simple and extremely high replayability. Now I'm going to go on to painting the hair, or kind of like fur coat over here as well. I'm going to paint it in black, but not entirely black. I think I'll paint it in German dark grey actually, German grey, because I don't want it entirely black, because it will contrast well when we highlight it with black afterwards. So German grey it is. And you can apply this one with a damp brush so you don't obscure the details. Showing you how to paint the back. Now I'll show you how to do the front. Don't load the paint with too much. Don't load the brush with too much paint. You'll be fine. So there it looks like. I see that I missed this small part here. It's very easy. Clean the brush, move on to the next stage. Vallejo's natural steel for the blade of the axe, as well as the kind of like necklace she has up there. Pommel of the dagger, and here we'll do some snakebite leather as well on these kind of like these feathery things as well. Apply it neat, not diluted. And as always, when it comes to steel colors, you can apply it across a dark, you can put German dark grey over these ones first if you want to make it look like a little bit better. Otherwise it will shine through. So that's acceptable. Don't forget the kind of like thing here in the back, as well as the pommel of the dagger. And her necklace here. Now I'm going to go on to Snakebite leather straight away. And find, oh, we'll also touch up some mistake here that we made with her neck here. We can also touch up a small mistake here we made on not covering the arm while we're at it. And the other skin parts areas we didn't touch up enough. Now let's do Snakebite leather, last one, before it's time for highlights. And there we have it. It looks quite okay. I'm going to put this one to a side. Back to the Warlock. I'll shade the entire miniature except for the brown and metal and skin parts with Druci Violet. As we didn't use contrast colors there, it needs some shade. Give it some shadow and definition. If you have a contrast color, you could do sky under purple for the contrast color and this one. But since I primed it in black, it's going to be harder for contrast colors to really shine. You really need to prime them in white or beige. like this. Same thing goes for any part that had on all figures any metal parts. So we're going to use some Nuln Oil or black wash for this one, in this case Vallejo's black wash, to apply some subtle details to these miniatures. We'll start with the Warlock. Apply it to the chain parts. Move on to the Thief, her sword, chainmail parts, yep. These ones, as well as her kind of like cat buckle here. And then finally we'll move on to the bardish here, shading it, as well as the handle here, the pommel, as well as her necklace. You can also shade her head already using the same color, it's black. Give it even more shadow and definition. There we go. We're also going to, now I'm skipping between figures now because I'm doing the shade part. I'm going to shade the hair of the Thief with some Cassandora yellow, which is a shade. It also gives it a slightly more orangey look with a little bit more yellow inside, which will be good for the highlight. It also brings out all the folds of the hair. Go with that one done. For all the skin parts, we're going to dry brush these with some flat flesh to even out the coverage from the contrast color, or speed paint in this case. So starting with this one, trying not to get it on top of the other. And we can leave it shaded in the recess. I just want the raised areas to be touched by these, and any areas where it's too white from the primer. Something like this for the Warlock. For the Thief, it's not dry yet, but for the Oracle it is. So we can highlight this one up. It's a nice way of actually teaching how to do the highlight with a dry brush. Sometimes you need a little bit more paint. You reapply. Take most of this paint off your brush and start the dry brush again. In this case I'm using an old size 00 brush to get the details. And the back. Something like this. Facial details are quite okay-ish. Not great at painting faces. So now we're going to go and for this one we're going to reapply some Mournful Brown on the leather parts here with a small quick highlight. For that I'm using a brand new brush. Size, in this case, size 2.0 from Golden Maple, bought off Amazon. And Mournful Brown, it will be this color. It's a nice highlight color. You can also use it as a base color. I'm using a very, very small brush to make sure all the details are covered. I'm getting really, really close to this one. As well as the straps here. All the leather parts. As well as in the back. Applying a little bit more color. And do the same thing for some parts of the sandals, but only small parts. I want still some of the original leather to show. As well as of the leather part here. As well as the handle of the axe or large axe. All right. Doing the same thing for all the brown parts on this one, or the leather parts, straps. This thing here, strap in between, is actually going to be gold cover, which is something that I missed by looking at the card art. Keep tapping it. Highlight is one of the more rewarding part of the painting stage, so you can really make many things pop. I'm going to put some of the things over here, of the scabbard, especially part of the side here that was covered by the green. As well as the boots. And I missed a part of the leather here. As for the gold part, I'm going to use Retributor armor from Citadel. The best color on the best gold color on the market that I've found so to date. I can also paint parts of this sword. Pommel got the guard, sword guard here. Make sure it stands out a little bit more. That's entirely optional if you want this one. Alright, time to put our attention a little bit on the metal parts. And for that I'm using some Chainmail silver, neat, from Vallejo. Same brush as well. Painting only the raised area of this cat here to make sure that those details are actually covered. And same thing with the raised areas of this one. The back here is entirely optional if you want to, but putting some detail on it just to make sure it's covered. Back of the sword, the same thing applies with that one. Now, quite important, the chainmail here would be quite neat to put some details on. It really makes it stand out. As well as the pommel here on the sword. And the skirt as well. Don't forget the skirt, chainmail skirt. Before I go on to, actually I will go on to the next part that actually has these things, and that is the bardish. I want it to be a little bit darker, this one, so I'll keep some of the darker areas here. But I want her necklace here to be popping a little bit more. There we go. Quite okay. Going over to the Warlock. Can part putting some attention on the chain here. I want it to be having a darker, grimier look. So I'm leaving some of the shadowed areas here. I'm painting only the spikes here. But you can paint it entirely as you wish. As well as putting some details on the clasps and the belt buckle. You can see it's not entirely dry yet. We'll leave this one aside. Now we're going to turn our attention to the yellow parts on the Oracle. I'm using Aerial Yellow, but you can also use Flash Gits Yellow if you like. Oh, sorry, I keep bumping it. This one I need to raise it. Or I just need to place it lower level, perhaps. I'm going to place some attention on some of the raised areas here, painting in these ones with some yellow, making them stand out a little bit more. As well as her chest armor. and the raised areas of the armor here, also which was covered by black a bit. And a little bit in between where it's too dark. Something like this. Now we're coming up over an hour. It's almost finished. But we need some attention on the green parts. And we're going to choose to, keep bumping into this one. Warpstone Glow on dry brush across the entire green part of the thief. Still want it to be a fairly dark green colour she's wearing, as she's a thief and thieves don't wear bright clothes. Maybe that's preconception, maybe they do, but my kind of Dungeons and Dragons kind of perception of thieves is they do not. Putting it a little bit lighter colour here. It's the front of the miniature. A little bit in between over here as well. Even out the colours. As well as her mask. I will paint it with pure Warpstone Glow. Alright, time for some highlights on the leather armor. And instead of using Mornfin Brown, I'm going to use something called Deathclaw Brown. Or on the other hand, actually, try some Zentry dust on the, give it a dustier look. Alright, that turned out to be quite okay. For the hair, I'm leaving it like this, but you can put in some Fire Dragon Bright if you want to. Dry brush of Fire Dragon Bright would be alright as well. Final part of this one would be how to, you can actually dry brush these ones up if you want to, with some, which I might do, sorry, Fusion, with some, let's see, we can take some another dry brush, some Naggaroth Night, light dry brush over the entire figure, or some of the figure. Give it a more purplish look. something like this. Now you can actually apply some of these white patterns on this one, and they're quite difficult to apply, so I'm going to try here with this one. Let's start with a circle. And then another circle and half circle inside of it. It's not really doing that much of a good idea. They're also putting these on the, put these patterns on the arms as well. What you can do is paint the kind of like edges of the cape here with some white, and make some stickling patterns like this across. This one doesn't have to be perfect. 2 round circle here, which I failed to do quite miserably, but I tried. And some of these patterns on the arms we'll have to do at least a few times. Now, final part of this miniature is to put in some natural steel on these studded parts of his armor. Try to get it right. And that concludes our painting series. As you can see, I left the orb completely white over here. You can paint it white again if you like, but that will be the final stage. You can also put basic material of your choice. Don't forget to seal the miniatures after you're done with some varnish. This is the last 3 of the figures from Karak, the board game miniature expansion set. I hope you liked this video. Despite all the mishaps with it. If you like it, please consider liking, sharing and subscribing, especially the latter. It helps my channel grow. And I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.